In the documentary Dangerous Days, The Making of Blade Runner, art director David Snyder proudly shares an anecdote about the day during the film's pre-production when executive producer Bud Yorkin visited the giant LA hangar where Snyder and his team were assembling the various vehicles and sets that would eventually make up the movie's futuristic vision of Los Angeles. "I'm telling you," Snyder recalls, "I could see the blood drain out of Bud Yorkin's face. He had no idea what was going on. He couldn't believe it. You're making chairs? You're making furniture? What are you making? Go buy a chair. Go buy a table. What are you making?" Snyder laughs as he shares the memory, but also defends the approach that so flustered Yorkin. As Snyder says, it was all beautifully designed museum pieces that you can't buy. Snyder is correct, and obviously has every right to be proud. Although initially a critical and box office disappointment when first released in 1982, Ridley Scott's Blade Runner would not only be quickly reappraised by audiences and critics alike, but would soon become an undisputed classic. In fact, it's arguable that Blade Runner is rivaled only by Star Wars as the most influential sci-fi films of the modern era. It is particularly Blade Runner's look that has cast the largest shadow over the genre. The dystopian, decaying, noir-tinged vision of an overpopulated city, both dark and bright at the same time, filled with flying vehicles and omnipresent electronic billboards, would become the go-to look for many sci-fi films and television projects that would follow in its wake. Of course, Snyder probably didn't know how influential his work on the movie would be when it was first released in '82, nor could he have realized that, at that same moment, a future project of his, one that would itself take cues from his work on Blade Runner, was about to be birthed across the Pacific. In 1983, Shigeru Miyamoto, a video game designer working for the relatively small company Nintendo, was trying to figure out his next game. He decided to take the heroic protagonist of his successful Donkey Kong series of games, a carpenter known only as Jumpman, and further expand and develop the character. Miyamoto changed Jumpman from a carpenter into a plumber, renamed him Mario, and gave him a brother, Luigi. Mario Brothers, the first game starring the two, featuring the brothers battling strange creatures in the sewers of New York City, was released to arcades in 1983. The same year, Nintendo also released its home video game console, the Famicom, in Japan. When Nintendo decided to expand the Famicom into America, releasing it in the States in 1985 as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, they knew they needed a signature game to go along with it. Miyamoto and his team delivered a follow-up to Mario Brothers, titled Super Mario Brothers, a side-scrolling adventure which saw the brothers leave New York and instead travel to the magical Mushroom Kingdom, where they must save the kidnapped Princess Toadstool from the evil Bowser, king of a turtle-like race of creatures known as Koopas. Unlike Blade Runner, both Super Mario Bros. And the NES were immediate massive successes. Nintendo would quickly surpass Atari as the biggest, most recognizable brand in the video game world, and Miyamoto's Mario Bros. Would go on to star in numerous sequel and spin-off games, as well as a never-ending wave of merchandise, making Mario the most iconic video game character of all time, arguably as recognizable around the world as Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, and Superman. But what does that have to do with Blade Runner? Sure, both Scott's film and the initial Mario games were released in the early '80s, and would go on to heavily influence their respective industries. But the connection should end there, right? Well, you'd think so. But then we must remember production designer David Snyder, who, 10 years after his iconic art design work on Ridley Scott's classic, would find himself on the set of a new film looking to replicate the dark, dystopian visuals of Blade Runner. Though, in this case, one can't help but look at this approach, contrasted with the source material in question, and simply ask, why? The year is 1993, and Walt Disney Studios and Hollywood Pictures are ready to take the most popular video game franchise in the world and launch it as the next big movie franchise, with Super Mario Bros. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. You still there?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear anything for a little bit. Are you ready? Should I just go whenever? Or?
Yeah, for sure. That's why I'm just like letting it go dead silence for you.
Okay, cool. You should give me like a 3, 2, 1 in the future,
3, 2, 1 silence.
Yeah, but I mean, at least then I know you're ready to record.
I said, okay, all right. Okay,
I didn't
I'll
hear
do
anything.
that.
It dropped out for a second. That's
We're keeping this in.
okay.
All right, I'll let you go. 3, 2, 1.
All right, welcome back to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris.
Chris, we're going to need to wrap this up a little quick today because I have a mud bath appointment I got to get to. You know what they say about mud, right? It's both clean and dirty at the same time, baby.
I hate you. This is the last episode of the podcast.
That is, I think you said that at the beginning of every episode. That is, of course. I mean, I doubt I even have to tell our audience this because it's just so iconic. But that's, of course, one of the famous lines from today's film.
Yes.
So today we are covering Super Mario. Now, do you say Super Mario Brothers or do you say Super Mario Bros?
I say Super Mario Brothers because that seems like the way that Nintendo wants you to say it. So
sure.
I don't know if Nintendo wants you to remember this movie, but that's how I think you should say it.
Well, that's a different subject altogether. But yeah, so this is 1993 Super Mario Brothers. We've already done a few films. We have a long list of movies to examine for this podcast. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we're ever going to talk about another movie this weird.
Yeah,
this is a head scratcher. This is an odd one.
It's a bizarre mismatch of a lot of ideas, and it's not really coherent in any way, shape, or form.
Well, it's just because when we were pitching, like, what, movies should we start with? We're trying to figure out our first early weeks. This was your idea. You said, let's go back to Super Mario Brothers. And I was like, okay, fine. And I was fine with it, but I wasn't super excited about, I was just like, yeah, that seems like a decent idea because we wanted to hit some 90s films just to not be, like, everything too modern. And then going back and rewatching it, I was like, oh, this was actually perfect.
Yeah.
This is this is such a strange just entity, and so yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
Can we just note that I had a perfect idea, and Trev gave me props, and this doesn't ever happen, and I just want to say you're welcome, Trev. You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean it took 5 episodes, but you had a single good idea. It's fine.
Don't you dare.
Boy, with that kind of track record, you could have been one of the writers for Super Mario Brothers. So Super Mario Brothers, directed by Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel, a at the time married couple, directing team. Written by, well, I'm just going to list the credited writers because there's a lot of writers on this, and we'll talk about this in a second. But the ones who end up with final credit are Parker Bennett, Terry Runty, and Ed Solomon, who people might. Ed Solomon is definitely the star of that bunch in terms of people remembering. So. Of course, Ed Solomon in recent days has gotten a lot of attention because him and Chris Matheson are the writing team that created the Bill and Ted films.
Yep.
But he's also credited writer on Men in Black and the Charlie's Angels films, the McG ones. He's worked on quite a bit over time. So I like Ed Solomon. Him and Chris Matheson both seem like good dudes too.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then just getting some some stats out of the way here. We got a budget of, well, according to Wikipedia, anywhere from 42 to 48 million. I mean, looking at the movie, I'm gonna go closer to the 48 actually.
Yeah, it's definitely all on screen.
Yeah, and a box office final take of about 35 million.
Isn't that weird? That box office? I was looking at that too. It says 35 million. That's worldwide, by the way, everyone.
Yeah.
But on Box Office Mojo, it actually says like 22 million. So it's like, either way, disaster.
Yeah, I mean, either way, you were not getting to even the low end of the budget predictions.
Yeah,
projections. Yeah,
which is kind of insane.
Yeah, and again, we're going to talk about. There's multiple reasons for that, but it's like our work here is pretty much done. Like, why wasn't this a franchise? Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
But ultimately, this is one. So we always like to start our episodes talking about like how did this movie even come to be? Why did they think it was a good idea? Mm-hmm. And I will say for this one, that's kind of a no-brainer, right? So you're talking about 1993, the early 90s, obviously. Mm-hmm. I look at this and think like, yeah, if I was somebody who had a lot of money to spend on producing a film and looking to turn a profit, I feel like I would have gone all in on a Mario Brothers movie around this time. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the early 90s is, I mean, I was like 4 or 5, and Mario was the hot thing, right? Those consoles were selling like hotcakes. So if you're looking at some certain IP to jump onto and to distribute to the world, and at that point Mario was like a worldwide phenomenon. So they were really the only player in town too. Like when it comes to only player, when it comes to video games. So it was a nice kind of like, this was kind of an experiment because this is the first video game movie. Yes,
Right. Yeah. 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 As you like to point out, I am much older than you. So in 1993, I was 67 years old.
at least 3 decades older.
And let me tell you, like you kids today with your your Wii U's and your TikToks and whatever else your Pokemon Goes, you don't know what it was like growing up in the 80s and being so it's actually kind of cool. Like that's one thing, a benefit of my age is being like, oh, I'm like that generation that experienced like that initial video game boom. And I will say, I remember as a little kid that like emerging, Nintendo and Mario mania. And even like in the like late 80s, I'm sure you've seen a little bit of this. I don't know if you've even like watched any of it, but in the late 80s there was a Mario Brothers cartoon on TV. It was like a strange hybrid show.
Oh yes, I remember that.
Yeah, with like so there was the live action segments where actually Mario was played by Captain Lou Albano, and Luigi was played by, I believe the actor's name was Danny Wells, I want to say. But they would do like their little the live action Mario segments that would then segue into the animated segments.
Right.
Which is actually a pretty clever way to do it, and I feel like it was like in retrospect is like the slightly better way of what they were trying to accomplish with this movie.
Definitely.
I had this like memory in my mind of like, wow, that show was like super popular and it ran for like a really long time. And I looked it up and it was only like the initial run of that show was only like 3 months. It was like,
Oh my God.
But it's one of those things where they were smart, right? And what they did is they recorded a lot of episodes in that 3 months and they produced a lot of episodes.
Okay.
So then it just like ran in reruns forever after that,
And is that like the extent to your relationship with Mario and Jack? Because I know you're not really a big gamer.
No. So that's what I was going to mention. So I can't remember. Yeah, we've certainly talked a lot about how I'm not a current gamer. So
Right.
in our little friend group, you guys all talk about the games, and I just kind of stay silent. Or sometimes I ask, if a game is like particularly terrible, I want to hear you guys complain about.
Well,
it,
you're also old and can't function with your phone. So I get it.
Yeah, and my hand-eye coordination is going as I get closer to death. So I just can't keep up with gaming. But no, I used to be like I'm of that generation where I have an Atari 2600 in my basement still.
Oh shit.
I have the original Nintendo. So that initial run of games, like I definitely did Atari. I did a Nintendo. Then I had the Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64. Like I was pretty much the last system I had. Well, I had a PS3, but I only had that because I wanted it as a Blu-ray player.
Right.
But really, like the last system I bought where I was like all in on gaming was the GameCube, and that's kind of where I started to fall off a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny because I guess we both have kind of a pretty big relationship with Nintendo in general.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like when I was a gamer, I always was a Nintendo loyalist. I never had the Genesis. I would only play Genesis at friends' houses. That's why I've never been like a big Sonic guy.
Right.
It was always Nintendo was always the system for me. Never, like I said, my PS3 was just a Blu-ray player. I only bought a few games for it. So I was all in on a Nintendo, and then I just kind of. My whole thing, and I know this obviously puts me on the outs with the current gaming phenomenon and culture, but as video games became more like movies, that's kind of when I became less interested in them. And even today, I would still rather just sit down and play like those old school, original Nintendo kind of games, the old 8-bit side scrollers or 16-bit side scrollers and stuff like that. I find them more challenging too. I feel like one of my things with like modern games is that I feel like the game holds your hand as you play it in a way that the old games didn't. To where it's kind of always telling you what to do next, and then you just have to do it. And if you don't, then it tells you what you did wrong. And you know what I mean? Like it's just there's something more. How we had to like read Nintendo Power back in the day to figure out how to get to the next level.
Yep. One of my best friends was a subscriber to that till the end.
Oh wow!
And it was he had every single issue that was coming out. Like he tried to find them But
like I'll give you this is the example I always use, and I think it was I was playing an Assassin's Creed game, I believe, and there was a character, or the character I was playing, fell in the water, and and then you're like drowning, and you have to grab a log or something,
right?
And it just comes up on the screen and says to grab the log, keep pressing the X button, and then you just do that, and it's like, okay, you did it, and I'm like, wow, that's fun. Like that makes like that. Why? What's the point of this? Like that to me is like what a lot of modern gaming is like. Now I know I'm simplifying it. And I know there's way more advanced stuff than that. But that's where I started to be like, this isn't like what I'm into.
Right. And it's funny you say that the old games were always harder and didn't hold your hand. And it's funny because it's kind of segues into the movie. The movie really doesn't do that either. It's kind of just a mismatch, and it's kind of hard to wrap your head around what's going on. And
as much as I would love to have Bob Hoskins hold my hand or just take me up in a big burly hug,
especially now, Bob Hoskins.
Oh, R.I.P. Bob Hoskins.
Papa bless.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, your relationship with Nintendo is funny because it kind of, I don't want to say like it ended, but mine continues to go. You know, me and my buddies still get together, you know, every couple of months, and we bought a Switch together, and we play Super Smash Bros. And we're definitely like Nintendo stands in a lot of respect. Like we're always discussing what's new, and shout out to the Brotherhood of the Traveling Switch, by the way. We get together and we're always up to date on what's going on. Like we did like the Sonic movie, that was fun, and we're probably gonna get sequels for that, so we won't talk about that movie on this show. But Mario's never really had his day in the sunshine, even though there was a game called Mario Sunshine. But yeah, he really hasn't had anything going for him. So this movie made a lot of sense to hit the ground running with a popular character and kind of see what happens.
Well, I was going to ask, like, what is your, just so, because you were asking about my gaming history, and I will say that, probably not surprisingly, as I told you, like, where my gaming, like, you know, days laid, I was always, like, a big Mario guy because, you know, when I was a kid, I played the initial Super Mario Brothers, and I remember getting Super Mario Brothers 2 and being so confused how it's such a different game, not knowing when I was a kid that it was literally a different game that they just put Mario into. You know?
Yeah.
And to this day, though, actually, just as a little aside, Super Mario Brothers 2 is still my favorite Mario Brothers game.
You would choose the second one.
It's awesome, man. You're pulling stuff out. You're pulling like things out of the ground, throwing them at Birdo. Come on, it's great.
Unbelievable. That's it.
Birdo's great.
That's it. That's all you.
No, you get to like when they're shooting the eggs at you, and you can jump on the eggs and then pick them up.
Oh my god,
it's a fun game. You can be Toad and the Princess Daisy. Come on, it's great. Or maybe Peach. I don't know. Don't remember. One of them. But yeah, so like those initial, especially those first 3 games, of course, culminating in Super Mario Brothers 3, which, come on, we can agree that one is a classic. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
yeah, 100%.
And then, you know, the initial like you know, Super Nintendo Mario game and everything, like, so, or sorry, 64 game. Like I was like with Mario for like a long time, so I wanted to ask, like, what's your just Mario relationship? Now I know you're Italian, so of course I'm sure for you he's kind of like an iconic hero, right? Like the ultimate representation of your culture.
I have paintings all around my house with him. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was
the first time I met you. You said, "It's a me, Chris," and I was like, "All right, I get it," you know.
Yeah, and then I jumped down my toilet and was like, "Bloom, bloom, bloom, bloom." Yeah, that's right. Yes, same deal. Like, I mean, Mario was always, again, I was kind of the perfect age. In a weird way, we were both perfect ages, which is. I grew up more in the Super Nintendo generation though, so I like my first iteration was Super Mario World, and that was like with Yoshi, and I'm like. I mean, you know this, but my favorite movie of all time is Jurassic Park. So, like, you had a dinosaur in there, you get an Italian, it's like, oh boy, it's me and my buddy. but no, Super Mario World was my favorite one. And, yeah, I was always Nintendo. I always got, like, an N64, and after that, and my cousin introduced me to the NES, so, like, I got to hold on to that for a few years. And, yeah, I was one of the guys that waited out in line for a Wii. To be disappointed 6 months later when it was boring. But Mario to me has always been kind of old reliable. That's what I would say. Yeah. Old reliable. Yeah. You know when a Mario game comes out, you know it's going to be good. It's going to be at least good. So like when, you know, like the Wii came out and Super Mario Galaxy came out, and then like I was always, that first party games from Nintendo were always the way to go. And Mario, it was always a safe bet.
Yeah, and I will say, like, my favorite video game franchise of all time is Mario Kart. That's the one video game where, even as I've moved on from gaming, I always want to try like the new version of Mario Kart, and there's been times where I've come close to pulling the trigger on getting a Switch just for like so I can play Mario Kart. You know,
yeah, Mario Kart, Mario Party, like those are just so fun. That's the best thing about Mario. Like I know we're just rambling on about a lot of gaming right now, but I mean I think it's justified. But
hey, we're doing Super Mario Brothers, people. Did you forget? Come on, let's set some context here.
Yeah, I don't want no angry tweets. The thing about Mario games were they were always fun with friends. That was like the best part about a lot of them. Like other than, like think about your Mario Tennis, Mario Kart, Mario Party. They were the games that you went over to your neighbor's house and were like, "Come over, let's play." And they built the system accordingly, right? You always had 4 controllers that you can plug in, and especially for the N64, I'm talking about. They were always a joy to share with somebody else, and even when they were the single player games, right? If you died, you passed on to your friend. You know, like they introduced that even in the NES Super Mario. So like you die and you become Luigi and you pass off to your friend and see how far you can get. So that's the best thing that Mario was for me, was that it was like the quintessential I don't want to say party game, but quintessential like friend game franchise. Does that make sense? I don't know. Maybe I'm just kind of
Yeah, no, I agree. And so to kind of like, I thought you were actually going to say something different. You said that's the best thing about Mario. I thought you were going to talk about another thing that is like kind of evident by what we're saying is that it's a character that can be ported into so many different kinds of games.
Yep.
You have your traditional Mario games, but then as you said, there's things like Mario Tennis or Mario Kart. Even this guy went to medical school just to get a degree so he could be Dr. Mario at a certain point.
Absolutely.
He's putting in the work.
Well, even like I mentioned, like me and my buddies with Smash Brothers. Like when Smash Brothers came out for N64, all of a sudden Mario was a ruthless killer. It was like, and it was like totally fine.
So when we go back to like the history of this film, to get back on track a little bit, you said that this is quite the experiment because nobody had done a video game movie before, and of course it was bound to happen. So it's and it's I think it actually is. However you feel about how this movie turned out or whatever, or what its legacy is, it does seem so appropriate that the first video game movie is Mario Brothers. Like, that just feels right because that is like there's no denying that Mario is the ultimate video game icon.
And that's probably why, like, no matter what you think of the movie or the history of it, it's kind of stood the test of time.
It has its place. People will always talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so to go back when we say, like, it makes perfect sense that they wanted to do this movie at the time because we're like 92. So, you're talking about 91, 92, they're gearing up to make this. And that's falling right into that Mario sweet spot we were talking about how at that point Super Mario 3 was, fairly recent. In fact, the elements of Super Mario Brothers 3 are what influenced a lot of this movie. And I feel like we were right on the cusp of getting like Super Mario World and like that. So I mean, it's like the perfect time to release a Mario movie, and to take the leap. But now, as we start to talk about the movie, here's where it starts to instantly become strange, because as much of a no-brainer as it is to say, oh, of course they make a Mario Brothers movie, who this starts with is the weird thing. So we need to talk about Roland Joffe.
Yeah.
And now I said that name, and I bet you I just summoned like a bunch of like film nerds. Like you see all these like movie hipsters suddenly perking up their ears. And I think a podcast is talking about Roland Joffe. Well, sorry, we're going to talk about Roland Joffe in a much different way. But if that name does sound familiar to you, it's because he's a very critically acclaimed British director and producer, primarily known for the films The Killing Fields and The Mission. Now, Chris, I don't know if you've seen either of these movies. I've seen them both. They're fantastic. I know you tend to not watch smart movies. You're just never. Mr. Blockbuster.
Never. I'm an idiot.
Yeah. That's
a young idiot.
Another way of saying it. The Killing Fields is a film about the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia. It's kind of like really intense, brutal drama. The Mission about Jesuit missionaries in the 18th century, starring Robert De Niro, Jeremy Irons. Two just fantastic films, and then he goes, you know what I want to do now? A Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah.
That's so weird.
Hard turn.
So until we started actually talking about doing this film and me doing some research, I never knew that. I never realized like he was the guy who got this ball rolling. And it's just so weird because like I was trying to think of what the modern day equivalent to that would be. And all I could think is that's like if suddenly like Werner Herzog was like, I think my next film will be Animal Crossing. Like that's where you're like, why is this guy? But even that's not quite as strange because at this point, Werner Herzog has already dipped his toes into being in The Mandalorian
But a Werner Herzog Animal Crossing does sound amazing. So just in case this
Werner
happens
Herzog,
now,
anything.
Yeah.
In fact, Werner Herzog should do the next Mario Brothers movie. Like,
and then they saw the farmers and the bears.
But yeah, so I don't know. In looking at this, I don't know if you found anything. I couldn't really find like where his interest in this started. I'm guessing just like just because most of the films he's made were more in like Oscar bait kind of dramas. Doesn't mean he's not a gamer, and I'm sure he maybe enjoyed the games. But whatever the case, he's the one who actually comes to Nintendo. In particular, he goes to meet with Nintendo of America. I love this story where it says that they flew him to Japan, but then made him wait 10 days to meet with them. So he's just kind of like sitting around like waiting, and then finally he got a call like summoning him to the offices.
So sweet, so Japanese.
Yeah, and then he pitches like his take, and then they basically even ask. So he's got a company called Light Motive, which is a kind of smaller production company, and he's saying, I think you should let us do this Mario Brothers movie because I can see that this is like a big phenomenon right now. Like I know it's an experiment, but let's try it. And Nintendo asks, like, well, why would we give it to you instead of a bigger company? And he basically says to them, well, the benefit of signing with us is that you'll have more control over the property.
Right.
This is where things already start to get weird because apparently that's the pitch that, like, sold Nintendo. But at the same time, they were instantly like, well, we don't even really want control. So I guess they just kind of liked that he was offering that. But ultimately, Nintendo was pretty hands off on this because they said they looked at it as just a fun way to see another company kind of experiment with their characters and see how that goes. I think they were looking at this as like a test run too.
Yeah, like Joffe had said that they Nintendo seemed to look at the movie as some sort of strange creature that was kind of intriguing to see, like rather than have their hands all over it. They're like, we'll see what these Americans can do with us.
Now, probably coming off of like that, wow, it's strange that a guy like Joffe is doing this. His initial like idea is to take the idea to Barry Morrow, the screenwriter of Rain Man.
Yeah.
Who creates a script that I love that people have called it Drain Man because they say it just basically reads like Rain Man. I'm just going to read directly from the little Wikipedia thing because I don't think I could say it any better or a funnier way. His story followed brothers Mario and Luigi on an existential road trip. He described his screenplay as a study in contrast, like Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello, that would have been an odyssey and a quest like the game itself. And co-producer Fred Caruso later said that Morrow's story was more of a serious drama piece as opposed to a fun comedy. So right off the bat, we're already heading into trouble territory here.
Yeah, yeah. As kind of interesting as that sounds, it is off the mark entirely.
Right. That's like a funny YouTube video, not
Sure.
you actually want to do your first big Mario Brothers movie. So then we get into a whole run here where I don't even think I don't want to go into too much detail because we could literally record a 4-hour episode about the history of this movie.
Of course.
But we start like ping-ponging between different teams of writers at this point. We're coming on and trying to create, scripts that are closer in tone to what the video game was. And different directors, at at a certain point, Greg Beeman, the director of License to Drive and Mom and Dad Save the World, was attached.
Harold Ramis was offered.
Harold Ramis was offered, and he was a fan of the video game, but he decided that he didn't want to do it. I think he was a little too nervous about the idea of video game movies. And I mean, I guess history has proven him right, So
Definitely. Danny DeVito was offered too, and he was offered to star at one point as well. And
I was thinking about that. I was thinking like that's actually like a really intriguing what if. First of all, you can totally see Danny DeVito as Mario. But also, like, I really like Danny DeVito as a director, and I think he would have had, like... But the thing is also, like, the Danny DeVito movies that I enjoy the most are dark comedies, so I think he could have gotten into the same problem again, but...
That's a good point.
But he's also done stuff like Matilda, so who knows? But whatever the case, like, we don't get a Danny DeVito, we don't get a Harold Ramis, we get Morton and Jankel. And why Morton and Jankel come on is that... Well, first of all, they're just getting, like, so close to production starting that they're, like, desperate at a certain point. And finally, Roland Joffe remembers Max Headroom. Now, Chris, I don't know how much you know about Max Headroom. This is another thing where I think my age probably benefits me a little bit because I'm pretty familiar with Max Headroom.
I have like no knowledge of it.
Okay, so Max Headroom is like a very strange character that's played by Matt Frewer, who's a great character actor. And it was initially created as like a host of a music video show, and the whole idea was that he was just this like he's like an AI character. The idea is like he's just like this kind of floating head in a digital environment. It's like he's kind of supposed to be like this boring guy in a suit, and he would introduce music videos. Okay. But it's actually, people talk about him as like a CGI character, but it was actually Matt Frewer like in prosthetics, pretending to be like an AI character. It's very strange. And for whatever reason, the character actually kind of takes off. It starts appearing in some advertisements and stuff, and then they kind of create like this whole mythology around him. And he gets a TV show on Fox that lasts a couple seasons, which is a very strange, like dark sci-fi comedy kind of show where you find out that it's in this like dystopic future, and Max Headroom is actually made of the brainwaves of this journalist who was killed by this company. Very, very weird. But because I guess that stuff takes place in this like digital environment, it's all about like digital technology and video games and CGI. Joffe's like, well, I guess they make sense to do Mario.
Right.
So he brings it to them, and at this point, there's a script involved that everybody seems to like, that people say is like pretty close to the games. This idea of these two brothers who get transported to this magical world and go on these adventures. But Morton and Jankel have like a different take. They want to make the movie as much like Max Headroom as possible, and they also sit down with Joffe and I'll talk about how like, well, what's been popular lately? In 1989 we had Batman, and in 1990 we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, both which had kind of a darker tone. So we want to do that. And Joffe agrees with them and lets them rewrite the script. Here's where we start to get into like big problems, though. So they bring on their own writers who kind of start retinkering Parker Bennett and Terry Runty. They're kind of tasked with bringing on a darker tone. Nobody tells the cast or
Yeah.
anybody else involved with the movie that this is happening.
Like
So
at this point they're like all getting ready to, like, Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo, like everybody's like basically ready to, they're prepping, aren't they?
Yeah, they're like set to go. We should have mentioned just because it's interesting some of the other like castings that didn't happen. Tom Hanks came really close to signing on as Luigi, but they actually decided against him because he had some recent box office failures. So they're like, nah, we don't want that Hanks guy. Good call.
Arnold.
Arnold Schwarzenegger almost signs on as King Koopa. Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting what ifs, but yeah. So when the cast finally arrives in North Carolina to film this, they basically like walk onto the sets, and instead of seeing Mushroom Kingdom, they see a Blade Runner-esque city.
Yep.
In fact, the production designer of this film, David Snyder, no relation to me, is also the production designer of Blade Runner, which tells you a lot about
great.
what they were going for. And that's very much like this movie is a strange Blade Runner version of Mario Brothers. And the cast arrives and they're just like, what?
Yeah.
And thus begins one of, from what I can see, it just sounds like one of the most troubled productions possible of this film.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I guess that's a good place to just kind of take a look at the film that is Super Mario Brothers.
Where are we? I got a feeling we're not in Brooklyn no more.
They're brothers. They're plumbers.
Oh no! Mario! Luigi!
They're on the trail of a kidnapped princess and a mystical meteorite
It's incredible!
that gives anyone who possesses it the power to rule the universe.
Get me the rock! Come and get it, lizard breath!
Now, they must rescue the princess
Alien species escaping.
and make it safely back
Later, alligator.
to our world
Are you alright?
before time runs out.
Shoot him! Get him! Yes! No, stop! Gotcha! No, not again!
Super Mario Brothers. This ain't no game.
Two Brooklyn plumbers, Mario and Luigi, must travel to another dimension to rescue a princess from the evil dictator, King Koopa, and stop him from taking over the world. Now, that sounds pretty close to the game.
Yeah,
if
you hear that and you
on
go,
paper.
oh, yeah, that sounds good.
I'm very excited for that, and I'm excited to visit all these colorful, beautiful, fun worlds where little mushroom people are running around. You stomp on them, and there's all these little dinosaur creatures, and they're so cute and cuddly, and Mario's.
I can't wait to see Bob Hoskins like grab a flower and start throwing fireballs at people.
Absolutely, yeah, like just burn people alive. Luigi with a mustache, like you're just ready to watch all your heroes, your fun-loving characters come to life. That is not what's going on in this movie, as we alluded to before. Not alluded to, we said before. All of a sudden, it's kind of this Blade Runner movie. Our characters get transported to this parallel dimension, right? And
Yeah, so
should we set this up? Should we set that up though first?
Right. The general conceit of this film,
Yeah.
as is told to us in a opening narration by Dan Castellaneta, interestingly
Yes.
enough,
Yes.
kind of doing like a Mario voice. It's really weird because I feel like they told him to do Mario, but then he's like like he probably hasn't seen Bob Hoskins' performance, you know? So it's like just a different thing. But he does this opening narration and explains when the meteor, so 65 million years ago, when a meteor hit the Earth, it didn't kill the dinosaurs. Instead, it opened up a dimensional rift and kind of put them in a separate universe. And in this universe, dinosaurs evolved into man, essentially. Don't question it. It's just what happened.
Yeah.
And so there's these two parallel universes, and so there's our world, and the movie, as you said, it takes place in New York and Brooklyn, and then these other, they end up going on this adventure to Dino Hatton, which is this parallel world where the dinosaurs have evolved into man. And the general, so the conceit of the film is as the movie starts, this like refugee from that world comes into our world and leaves an egg at a Catholic orphanage. And that's so the movie is like strange right away because one
Yeah.
of the first images of the film is an egg hatching and there being a human baby inside.
Yeah.
And as we learn later, that is Daisy, who is played the older version is played by Samantha Mathis, an actress I quite like. People know her from Pump Up the Volume and Broken Arrow.
Right.
Really cute, cutie pie, I would call her. I had a crush on her back in the day.
Oh, absolutely. She's cute in this. We actually just recently watched Broken Arrow together as our friends group, so it was kind of fun to put that together.
Yeah, a double dose of Mathis. But anyway, so then we catch up with the Mario brothers, as two New York plumbers in the modern day. Now, is this, I do believe, and I think it has since become canon, or maybe just everyone says it's a joke and it's to the point where it has become canon, but this movie is where it's established that their last name is Mario, right? That had never been in the games, I don't think, at this point.
It was never in the games, no.
Yeah. Is it now, though? Does this movie actually make that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's a real thing. I think it's more of a joke, like you said. It's
Okay.
They're still just kind of like Cher or Madonna. You know what I mean? They got one.
Yeah.
They got one first name and that's it.
I do like it. I like the idea of Mario, and Luigi Mario. I think that's a funny joke.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's a good move.
Now, never mind the fact that they don't look like brothers at all, age-wise or just in appearance.
General race.
Yeah, attitude, any of it. But instead, we have Bob Hoskins as Mario and John Leguizamo as Luigi, and so they end up meeting Daisy. This is like I'm sure I sound like I'm just rambling, but
Yeah, but this is the kind of this is just weird about the movie because so reminder, the game is to give the screenwriters credit a little bit. Like the games don't really have a jumping off point either.
No, they did have to kind of create a narrative in a way.
Yeah, so like I kind of I don't want to say applaud them, but I want to be like, okay, well, nice try, for trying to fix something up. But it starts off just really dark and weird because all of a sudden they're hinting in Brooklyn that a bunch of young women have been like abducted, and you're just kind of like, okay, this is weird. And then your heroes, I don't know if they're likable. I think they are, and they're not.
I think Luigi's likable.
Yes, Mario's kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
And like they have a failing plumbing business, which is funny because actually we've talked about Ghostbusters in the past, the remake, but the original Ghostbusters seem to be sort of a template for some parts of this movie.
Oh, for sure.
It definitely I didn't do any history of the movie before rewatching it. And even in my notes, I was like, man, this feels like Ghostbusters. But yeah, the weird thing about the girls getting abducted and stuff. And it's funny because when you first meet Daisy later on and Luigi has the hots for her and they're like, do you need a ride? And she just jumps in their rusty van without even thinking about it. And it's well known throughout the city that people are being abducted. So I was like, this is a little weird. These two random dudes in their rusty van. I also thought it was ridiculous. Okay, I just didn't like how they... Okay, what's the color that Mario wears?
Red.
Okay, and Luigi wears green.
Yep.
Why in the entire movie is Mario wearing green and Luigi wearing red until later on in the film, spoilers, they get discount versions of their real costumes and they switch colors. It's almost like they haven't reached... the movie was waiting for them to reach final form and swap colors.
I feel like that's what I because that I don't think anyone making this movie was so dumb that they didn't notice that. So
For
that was
sure.
clearly like a choice, and I think you
Absolutely.
just hit it. I think that was very much somebody thought they were clever and was like, this is their origin story.
Absolutely.
So we don't put them in their colors until we get to the moment where they become the Super Mario Brothers. But it is strange. That's the thing. So we've already said 100 times, but if you haven't seen this movie and you're just listening to us, we really can't make it clear enough how jarring it is to watch this film when you're expecting a Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yes.
Because just visually and everything about it is just not that. It's just so strange. It's just
And even
so
the way that we're talking too, I feel like maybe we're jumping around and we're trying not to. I promise we're trying not to jump around and kind of hold your hand through this movie, but it is an odd duck.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the whole first half hour or so is just taking place in New York, and it's just this strange. I guess at least at that point, it's trying to be a comedy with the antics of the two brothers and their rivalry with another plumbing company. Sure. And everything, but it's just at that point you're just like, okay, this is not what I signed on for. But then it even gets to the Mario Brothers elements. That's not what you signed on for either, because what is eventually revealed is that the reason all these women are going missing is because President Koopa, the villain, played by Dennis Hopper, oddly enough, the evil ruler of Dino Hatton. He's basically discovered that this idea of there being two parallel universes created by this meteor, and he wants to merge the two universes so that he can be a dictator of both. He's basically mad that mammals went on to live in this like other universe, and the dinosaurs have been stuck in his. And he wants to rule both. And the key to that is a piece of the meteor that hit the Earth, and that piece of the meteor was left with that little baby in the egg. And so they're looking for whoever that little girl grew up to be, because she's the actual princess of this world. And not surprisingly, that turns out to be Daisy, who does not know that about herself. She just knows that she has this necklace that was left with her when she was a little girl. And so they kidnap her. They also kidnap Mario's girlfriend, who we should say is not Peach, and I don't know why.
No, but she is. She's stacked. Now I'm saying. She's
really cute. I think she's actually kind of funny. She's definitely just like the Italian girlfriend stereotype, but I did enjoy her scenes.
Yeah. I was offended by a lot of this movie as an Italian, but it doesn't matter. It's fine. I'm kidding.
I mean, I've known you for a while. It felt pretty accurate. But no, it's definitely it's definitely like that same like generic Italian stereotype
Big
stuff
time.
you would get in like the movies of this era. Played for laughs, but for sure.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I thought she was pretty cool. But I also just want to point out, guys, not that accuracy was clearly important to them, but by the way, in the continuity of the games, it's Peach that's the princess of Mushroom Kingdom, not Daisy. Thank you very much. So
weird how they screwed that up. Didn't make any sense.
Because I don't think the games ever come out and say that Daisy is Luigi's girlfriend. I know people have kind of extrapolated that a little bit. But I just thought it is kind of interesting and almost maybe it's a little bit admirable that the main love story in this is Luigi's story and not Mario's. I thought that was kind of cool, but whatever. I don't want to give them too much credit for that.
There is a Daisy in the games, though, right?
Yes, yeah, that's what I just said.
Yeah,
I said I'm saying in the games even. It's ever said that Daisy and Luigi are a couple, but I think because Peach and Mario are a thing, people just always assume Daisy and Luigi are.
Oh yeah, okay, I see what you're going.
So I think like that's why they use Daisy, because she was the one that's more connected to Luigi in people's minds. But I just thought there could have at least been a joke. I'm surprised there wasn't a joke where Mario was talking. I don't remember the girlfriend's name. I don't know if they ever say it,
Right.
But I'm surprised there's not a part where he's just like, I call her my little Peach or something. Like that's what I would have thought they would have done.
Yeah.
But just so they're both kidnapped and taken to this world, and then Mario and Luigi have to follow, and then that's where you just get into suddenly you're in this like strange dystopian Blade Runner world, and then from that point on, it's basically like the challenge, or I don't know if you want to look at it as like a fun challenge or a frustrating challenge, maybe a little bit of both, a little bit of A, a little bit of B. The rest of the movie is basically watching it and trying to figure out what everything is in connection to the game. Like, oh, how did this become that?
Yeah, like
so,
I
why
found
is Big Bertha, who's a giant fish in the game, instead represented here as an overweight black woman in a red dress,
wearing like fishnets and like fetish type, bondage wear.
Yeah, and that scene takes place in a strip club, we should say. Yeah, no, we're not exaggerating.
Yeah, no, it actually it's kind of well known that there was strippers hired in that scene, and they were being a little too risque, so they had to edit the scene down. And remember, kids, this is your movie about a video game characters, colorful world. Also, I would say about even the Blade Runner-esque stuff, there's also all this like fungus that they talk about that's just everywhere. So like it's supposed to kind of allude to the Mushroom Kingdom, obviously, but it's just like so gross. And like it's not like these like fun little mushroom looking, animated things around. It's like this just gross, like almost like bile fucking vomit shit that's just everywhere around the world. So it leads you into just a really ugly an ugly environment. And like you said, you try to look around to see the stuff that's alluding to the games. Like there's neon lights of like Hammer Bros for like a store or whatever. And Toad shows up as not a little cute creature, but as a busking musician with a weird haircut. And he looks like about 45 years old. Yeah.
I was very disappointed because like I was reading that was initially supposed to be Tom Waits.
Oh, okay.
And they couldn't get Tom Waits, and that's a bummer because like if Tom Waits was in this, I would love it so much more. But unable to get Tom Waits, they went with Mojo Nixon, who is a kind of like a cult figure, a psychobilly cult figure in the music world. Who actually even his agents pitched him to the production as a third-rate Tom Waits and a much cheaper version. But yeah, so he's like you said, he's just like this kind of like guitar playing human who then is captured by King Koopa or President Koopa in this. Sorry, and so Koopa's whole thing is that he has a de-evolving ray that can de-evolve people into the Goombas. So the Goombas in this are not mushroom people, but instead weird human lizard hybrids with giant bodies and small little lizard heads. I don't know. I mean, you just have to see it just to believe it. It's such a weird design. And again, nothing about it even evokes Goombas. Like when they say Goomba, you literally, the first time watching this film as a Mario Brothers fan, you're just like, what?
Yeah.
That's the Goombas? What are you talking about?
I wonder if they fell in love with, there's some really good, I will say there's some pretty good animatronic work in the movie. And it's
Yoshi's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, Yoshi's awesome. That was probably like my favorite. I don't want to say like my favorite character, but like I do like seeing that. It looked really good. It's like fully animatronic, and it's got a lot of emotion to it, and it's cute, but yet realistic.
Like, for those who don't know, like Yoshi's actually the one who's closest to the movie or to the game, because Yoshi in this literally is just a small little friendly little dinosaur
that Bob Hoskins could definitely not ride.
No.
R.I.P. Bob Hoskins.
That would break Yoshi's back.
You just fat shame dead Bob Hoskins?
You did it first.
You had to be called out for it, though. I
mean, Mario is meant to be like the chunkier of the two. So I'm not saying anything that, there's a reason they were talking. There's a reason they were thinking of casting Danny DeVito and Bob Hoskins in this part,
Yeah, for sure.
And then, so we haven't even mentioned, we mentioned that Dennis Hopper plays Koopa, but that's obviously probably the weirdest one, right? So, people know, whether you call him Bowser or King Koopa, everyone knows what that character looks like, this giant evil turtle. And it's just Dennis Hopper, man. It's Dennis Hopper with a bad bleach blonde haircut and a suit. And
it's funny.
So just really quick. I mean, we mentioned during our Waterworld episode that we're always excited to see Dennis Hopper. In particular, Dennis Hopper playing a villain. It's always great. And I stand by that. Still, that doesn't mean he should be playing President Koopa.
Well, that was exactly what I was going to say. Like, usually he elevates a bad script or something, but he was actually like pretty shitty in this. Like, you can tell he hated being there. And looking back at the history of what's going on, apparently he was like the number one bad blood guy. Like, he was very upset with everybody in the production. Like, Bob Hoskins was mad about stuff too, and he made it apparent. John Leguizamo and then Samantha Mathis just kind of went with the flow. But Dennis Hopper was kind of volatile, starting fights, screaming for hours at the directors, crew members, everything about this is bullshit. He goes, I only took this shit for the money. he was like well known that he was in it for the paycheck. So, and you can tell he's not really giving his full Dennis Hopperism into this. No. He's going through the motions.
And it's too bad because this is exactly the kind of movie, and like because there's other issues with it, like an over-the-top, just as was the case in Waterworld, an over-the-top Dennis Hopper performance could have elevated some of these scenes and made it like pretty fun on that level, where you'd be like, oh, this is so weird, but it's awesome that he's like just going all in. But like I said, he's kind of not.
Yeah, no, not at all.
But it's not. I will say not all the performances are bad. I actually think for knowing. So we'll talk about this in a bit, but for knowing that neither of them were necessarily having a good time either, I actually do like Hoskins and Leguizamo in this.
For sure.
In particular, Leguizamo. I think he's pretty high energy in this. You definitely get the sense of. This is a performance of an actor who is looking at this as like a big break.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
This is like his like first leading role, and he's like, oh man, this could be my star moment, and he's kind of all in on it. And he's just like I find him like very likable in this. And then Bob Hoskins just doing kind of like the traditional gruff Italian guy. But I mean, also just Bob Hoskins is a fun screen presence. Again, it's that thing where you do like seeing him, and he's really just doing the same thing he did in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But that's okay, I'll take it.
I mentioned earlier that it was kind of I maybe misspoke saying they're not as likable because I did actually find them together. They're actually kind of charming. The movie is a total mess, but those two together are actually if your two main leads are working. And they are seemingly giving it their all, too. Like, Bob Hoskins, he's a professional. You can tell. Like, whatever he went on, him and Leguizamo, like, what they were dealing with behind the scenes, he at least came to play. And he does a really admirable job.
And you can tell they like each other, and that's like a key part of it
Yes.
too, right?
Yes.
You can tell like whatever's going on, they get along, and that natural friendship is coming into the brother relationship here.
There was a story that Bob Hoskins didn't really like hang out with them a lot. Like they had like this beach house or whatever, and he like had his big mansion, and one of the what's his name? One of the actors who played like Iggy or Spike, not Fisher Stevens, the other one, was like getting high with Leguizamo, and Bob Hoskins like found out that they were, so he like came over and he's like, "Yeah, smoking reefer," and they like just kind of like all hung out together, knowing that this movie was kind of a disaster. So that was kind of fun. Actually, Leguizamo has a couple things to say. I guess he's gone into. You want to talk about that, Trev?
Well, I guess that's a good way to segue into, we have a long-running tradition here. I know this is only our 4th episode, and we've never done it before, but I don't care. I'm saying it.
Absolutely.
The fact that this movie has John Leguizamo in it gives us a great opportunity to revisit the world's favorite podcast within a podcast. It's time for another installment of Let's Go Leguizamo.
I like to do my beats, cruising cream, playing 3-card money on these crazy streets. Straight hustler, I pull a scam in a minute. So low to the flow, pick the pocket on a midget. Slick shyster, the best meister, living life in Miami's vice. Mash, see? Nobody messing with the frog, see? Watch him sign now.
So, of course, that little music you heard there was the classic theme song from the great comedy film The Pest, starring John Leguizamo, which, of course, means it's time for Let's Go Leguizamo. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris.
Yep. Welcome to episode 1. And this is, of course, the show where we take a look at what John Leguizamo has to say about these films that he's appeared in that didn't really, take off the way he wanted to. So this, of course, comes from my copy of, I do own, Pimps, Hoes, Playa Haters, and All the Rest of My Hollywood Friends, My Life by John Leguizamo. The John Leguizamo autobiography, written in, 2006. So I'm waiting for him to do an update on this. I feel like I need a volume 2. But
Absolutely.
But let me read you a little bit of chapter 8, his chapter about Super Mario Brothers. Now I'm not going to read everything he writes, but I would love to, because this is pretty fascinating. Now, you might find, if you look up John Leguizamo, Super Mario Brothers, you might find him saying some kind of nice things about this movie in recent years. During a 20th anniversary, celebration, he recorded a little video and sent it to them where he's talking about, he's like, he's not all in on the movie or anything, but he says, I'm glad people found an appreciation for it. And,
he's proud of it, looking back on it. Yeah.
He's a little bit more honest in the book. So let me read the opening of this chapter. Don't hold Super Mario Brothers against me. I mean, when you decide to do a movie, you don't go into it saying, oh man, I'm so excited to be making this movie, it's really going to suck. You go into it thinking, I'm going to rock this thing, and only then you find out it's going to suck. And then you'll say or do anything to try and get out of it. You're in your trailer, they're waiting for you on the set, a production assistant is banging on the door, and you're like, tell them I'm sick, tell them I have brain cancer. Anything, just get me out of this movie. At first, I was totally up for it. Computer games were huge, and a movie based on one of the most popular ones seemed like such a natural. It would jump my career to the next level, and I'd be getting to act with Bob Hoskins, Dennis Hopper, and Fisher Stevens. But oh, I had a horrible time making that movie. What a nightmare. It almost killed me. One of the few upsides was that I started to hang out with the lead actress Samantha Mathis. Oy vey, another shiksa, blonde, button-nosed, real pretty girl. Maybe you saw her in Broken Arrow or American Psycho or Rules of Attraction. You saw her in Super Mario Brothers? Dag, that makes 2 of us. She was going out with Nicolas Cage at the time, and I stole her from him by accident. Then River Phoenix stole her away from me. That girl was like a heist movie. She liked to get stolen. So then he tells a story about how he dated her during a movie, and he says that was one of the nice things about it.
Right.
He says, meeting Samantha was just about the only good thing about making Super Mario Brothers. I hated the movie. I hated what I was doing in it. I hated the whole situation. Mario Brothers was another movie set where I drank a lot out of pure depression. Drank too much, smoked weed, ate shrooms, partied with the rest of the crew, all of us whining and commiserating about this miserable experience. It's always that way. The worse the movie, the better the partying. Then he says, the director was this British couple, Annabelle Jankel and Rocky Morton, who had previously directed Max Headroom. Let's see, I'm going to skip ahead to a little bit what he says from here. So in the first place, they were confused about what kind of movie we were making. They wanted to make an adult movie, and the studio wanted it to be a children's movie. In the end, I think the studio was right, but I was torn about it too. I didn't want to make a children's movie, but I knew that was the prime audience. It's 8-year-olds who played the game, and that's where the movie needed to be aimed. But Annabelle and Rocky kept trying to insert grown-up material. They shot scenes with strippers and with other sexually explicit content, which all got edited out in the end anyway. He tells the story. So he's talking about, I'll just summarize some of this. I want to get to the last part here. So then he's talking about his relationship with Bob Hoskins and how everyone's miserable. He says that, I don't know if you heard this story. Actually, let me read this.
Yep.
After a while, Annabelle and Rocky turned a lot of the crew against them. One day, Rocky's looking at all the extras on the set, and he's not happy. These costumes are too pristine, he says. They look horrible. I can't believe it. He grabs a cup of coffee and pours it all over one of the extras. The extra's in a rubber mask, but it's not sealed at the neck, so hot coffee pours through and burns him. The guy's screaming, and Rocky shrugs. Oh well, he's just an extra. The crew was aghast. They made t-shirts with all the kinds of dismissive comments the directors made, and people wore them on the set. Then he's talking about how like Bob Hoskins and him were super miserable, but they just drank constantly, and that's what we're talking about. They did get along. They were just always going after they would call cut. They were just going to Bob Hoskins' trailer, and Bob Hoskins was just getting drunk to the point where actually, an early scene where they're driving together. John Leguizamo tells the story that he was actually drunk during that scene. He talks about how he's like, yes, I know I was unprofessional, but that's but he actually ended up he was not supposed. He shouldn't have been doing the stunt driving anyways, but he was already drunk. And he actually crashed the vehicle, and it broke Bob Hoskins' hand. So if you'll notice, there are some scenes in the film where if you look really closely, Bob Hoskins' hand's not moving. It's because it's actually in a cast, and they painted the cast to look like a hand, or look like a skin.
Yep.
So then I'm just going to wrap this up with the last little bit, because I feel like, Chris, you're gonna like this bit.
Okay.
So he's talking about, so then he does wrap this up by saying, that he does have 8-year-olds come up to him all the time and say, I love Luigi. So he says, at least it found some audience. But he says, oh man, that movie sucks and I suck in it. But I don't just blame myself. Every director should try acting, just as every judge should spend some weeks in jail to find out what he's handing out to others. So he's basically saying, the problem is the directors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then he wraps it up by saying, actually, there was one other audience for that movie. A famous porn star at that time got in touch with me. I love Super Mario Brothers so much, I'll give you a blowjob for your birthday, she purred. Yo, I'm down with that. I met up with her in LA, we went out on a date, but it didn't really work out. For one thing, it's intimidating being with a porn star. There's just too much traffic, too much mileage. You can't help thinking about all the guys she's done all those things with before you. All those porn studs. You can't help wondering how you measure up. Also, she was hot, but not as hot in person as in her movies. And for her part, I think she was just trying to not be a porn star with me. She wanted to be just a regular chick. Like she wanted to be respected. So she wasn't the wild sex fiend you'd expect. I never did get that blowjob. And
Poor
thus wraps
Leguizamo.
John Leguizamo's great story about the making of Super Mario Brothers. And thus wraps another episode of Let's Go Leguizamo.
So stupid. So dumb. Oh my god.
So thank you for your honesty, John. But yeah, so actors just constantly getting drunk together. A crew in revolt against the directors who are out of their league. And so he did mention there too, another thing we didn't bring up is the fact that at a certain point, Disney actually got involved with this, and they decided that they wanted to be the distributor of it. So,
right.
you had like Joel and Jaffe's company producing it and putting it together, but Disney comes on, and that is where it starts to become like even more of a cluster, fuck behind the scenes, because Disney is pushing for it now to be more of a children's film and demanding script rewrites. And that's actually when Ed Solomon kind of got involved and was brought on. And then the other two initial writers, I don't know if you've read about this, where they just came to set. They weren't even invited. They were just like, well, we'll come. At this point, they'd been taken off the project, and other writers had come on.
Right.
But they just went to the set, and because they were there, they were just like, no, you guys stay. And then they were basically tasked with doing constant rewrites as it was going on. So nobody ever knew what was going on. And that's the thing is when you look at a film like this, with these kind of sets and these kind of elaborate effects and stuff, you can't make a movie like that on the fly.
No, not at all.
There has to be some kind of plan in place, and it just sounds like the plan was constantly in flux. The directors didn't know what they were doing. They weren't into making the game. They had this weird idea of making a more adult orientated strange prequel to the game.
Well, and that's the weird thing you're saying. Okay, so from all our discussion here, it is so not the game. Okay, it is. We can't stress that enough. That it's in name
so
only.
Much so that whenever something happens from the game, it you're shocked by it almost.
Yeah, when a Bob-omb shows up, and
which by the way is one of my favorite parts though.
Absolutely, and that's why it works though. It's kind of it's hitting those all those things, but it's just, it feels odd. It feels out of place. The imagery from the games feel out of place. And it's funny. So because I bring that up because Mario's creator, Miyamoto, had actually commented on the finished product. And he's quoted to saying, "In the end, it was a very fun project that they put a lot of effort into. The one thing that I still have some regrets about is the movie may have tried to get a little too close to what the video games were. And in that sense, it became a movie that was about a video game rather than being an entertaining movie in and of itself." Now, Miyamoto, obviously saving face. Obviously there. I mean, that's just him. He's not going to talk shit about the movie in the way he probably should. But to say that it's too close to the game is a little it's just stupid.
Yeah, that is literally, he is literally the only person who's ever said that. You know what the problem with that movie is? It's too close to the game.
Yeah, it's too close to my original vision. And it's funny because I just want to bring up one other quote because you talked about Leguizamo's talk about like Leguizamo's comments on the film and the production, right? Mm-hmm. So I might even try to do a little Cockney accent here. So let's see how it works out for us. But Bob Hoskins has been, well, not has been. He did talk about the movie openly about how much of a disaster it was. So he's a pretty gruff Cockney guy, and I've been told that I swear a little bit in this podcast. So I'm gonna take this expletive-driven Bob Hoskins quote. "The worst thing I ever did was Super Mario." No, I'm not gonna do it.
I don't.
Should I do it?
Yeah, I just commit, man. Just go.
Okay, I'll do it. Okay. "The worst thing I ever did was Super Mario Brothers," he claimed years later. "It was a fucking nightmare. The whole experience was a nightmare. It had a husband and wife team directing." Oh, I sound Australian.
Who cares? Just go. Keep going.
Okay. It had a husband and wife team directing. There was arrogance. It had a husband and wife team directing whose arrogance had been mistaken for talent. After so many weeks, their own agent told them to get off the fucking set. Fucking nightmare. Fucking idiots. Anyways, so there you go. There's my Australian version of Bob Hoskins.
Well, you know why that's appropriate is that, so I don't know if you know this, Chris, and you're not going to be surprised that I know this, but Bob Hoskins was actually who Chris Claremont wanted to play Wolverine in the X-Men movies.
I did know that.
So I don't mind you going Australian because an Australian did end up playing Wolverine, so it all comes together in the end.
Trev, this is why we make a perfect team. Thank you, and good night.
Dennis Hopper said in 2008, "It was a nightmare, very honestly, that movie. It was a husband and wife directing team who were both control freaks and wouldn't talk before they made decisions. Anyway, I was supposed to go down there for 5 weeks, and I was there for 17. It was so over budget." So yeah, nobody seemed to have a good time. Samantha Mathis is the nicest about it in retrospect. She says, "There are a lot of people who are really excited to meet me because I was Princess Daisy. That's all you can ask for as an actor, that your work and something you were a part of left an impression on people and makes them feel good." And I actually like that attitude. And I will say, I do wonder, because like everything, so like the Bob Hoskins interview you're talking about obviously came from, I think, like 2007 or something. Mm-hmm. You know, we got John Leguizamo doing this, like, you know, still at this point, almost like 10 or 15 years ago, talking about it. I do wonder, because I don't want to say the movie's reputation has grown in time, over time. But I will say, I think Samantha Mathis has the right attitude, right? Because we're kind of bagging on the film a little bit, but in a moment we'll summarize our thoughts. Yeah. But the movie has an audience, and it's so interesting. And I do think there were at the time a lot of kids who liked it, even though that's weird to say because it clearly was not being made for kids. No, it definitely is a movie that doesn't seem to know who its audience is. But I bet it is kind of cool to like still be in a movie and have people come up and be like, "Oh man, when I was a kid, like I loved that movie," you know, and it does mean something to someone. So it is kind of a bummer to hear that they were all that miserable about it. I'm not to say that if it was a terrible experience making it, but you do kind of wish that maybe Hoskins and Hopper could have in retrospect been like, "Yeah, I was miserable at the time, but at least people seem to enjoy it," you know? Totally.
It at least found an audience along the way. Or honestly had it while it was out. So
because there's so many strange things we haven't talked about in this film. That's why I said like this could be so we could why did we even start a podcast about movies that didn't franchise? We should have just started a Super Mario Bros. Movie podcast. We could have just talked about this for years. We haven't talked about the fact that the fungus that you were talking about the fungus that covers the city. We find out that that's actually Daisy's dad,
which is a king.
the king, who's played by Lance Henriksen, but throughout most of the film, is just literally a fungus that covers the city. We didn't talk about the scene where Koopa's villainous henchwoman plugs the meteorite piece in, and it fucking blasts her back against a wall and vaporizes her into a skeleton. And Luigi makes a joke instantly, like a woman has just died, and he's like, "Wow, she sure does leave an impression." It's like, "All right, that lady's dead, Luigi."
We also didn't talk about the de-evolving guns that people have. That you shoot a gun at somebody, and then you de-evolve them to what they should be. So a human gets de-evolved to a chimp, and certain henchmen get de-evolved, but just their heads. Get de-evolved to dinosaur heads, even though their bodies are the same, but they kind of get bigger. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't matter. Who cares? Just go with it.
We didn't talk about Spike and Iggy getting their brains manipulated and then becoming smarter, which
and they get
good.
And they totally, yes, they become part of the protagonist. They want to help out the good guys because now they're smart enough to realize Koopa's mistakes. Remember, just go with it. It doesn't matter.
We didn't talk about the scene where they're like flying down that tunnel, that like pipe. And Mario just like flat out kills tons of Goombas, even though we have learned that the Goombas are just like innocent slaves, essentially.
And reminder, when they're going down that tube on that mattress, it's played by not hard rock, but rock music is playing. We've never had an instance of rock music the entire time, but it plays down that scene. What else?
We didn't talk about the scene where they actually, for a brief moment, do manage to merge the two universes, and we watch the World Trade Center fucking disintegrate.
Yes, that was interesting. That was very...
There's a little bit of a, oh, no.
Yeah, we should probably edit this for content. We didn't also talk about how Mario goes chin deep into Bertha's cleavage to grab that asteroid shard or meteor shard.
Speaking of Bertha, though, and to get into some things I do like,
the rocket boots. Hold on, we didn't talk about rocket boots.
That's what I was gonna say. The stompers. Yes. So Bertha gives them stompers, which are boots. They basically look exactly like, and maybe they are, because we talk about how movies sometimes share props. I think they might be. Yeah. They look like the boots from Face Off that they use in the futuristic prison.
Totally, you're so right. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, but that's actually a pretty clever way to explain how high Mario and Luigi can jump in the games. I thought that was kind of cool, the idea of the stompers.
But do you think they ever jump on somebody's head?
Nope.
No. Not once.
Which is surprising because they do seem pretty bloodthirsty in this. We, of course, all remember Mario's classic line from the games, ported over into the movie, "I'm going to break all the bones in their body and then kill them."
Yeah, it was ruthless.
I did mention the bomb. I do love that sequence. I think that's I think that's legitimately funny. The moment where he pulls out this tiny little bomb and everyone in the city's like, "It's a bomb!" and they'll start running away.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then we cranks it up and turns it on, and we just see it walking for like 4 minutes before it blows up. The only disappointing thing is when it finally blows up, it's not as big as you want it to be, which kind of undersells the joke. But still, I like that moment. I do like the just total strangeness of the moment where Mario and Luigi end up in an elevator with a bunch of Goombas. And Luigi just starts rocking them back and forth, and they all start dancing because they're just so dumb that once they start moving like that, they just go for it, and that's how they get out.
They actually even turn to each other and start dancing with each other.
I do like the look of Mario and Luigi in their suits. You did call them like bargain bin versions of it, and I agree, but I still think it looks kind of fun.
Oh, for sure.
So there's some stuff, like that's the thing. Like ultimately, I guess we can just kind of start wrapping it up, but. I have a complicated relationship with this movie because I remember seeing it as a kid, and I do remember when I saw it just being confused by it.
Do you remember? I forgot to mention that. When did you see this in theaters?
I did not see it in theaters. I saw it in video. I saw it in its initial video release.
So you want to hear the funny anecdote of when I saw this movie?
Sure.
So I saw it I was at a birthday party. It was probably 94 then because it was on video release. Or end of 93. But I was at a birthday party. And the parents went out to go rent a movie for all of us. Like, we had a little pizza party and all this, whatever. So I'm probably like 5 or 6, probably 6 years old. We put the movie on, and it's Kingpin. Okay. So Kingpin's playing. So if everybody knows Kingpin, it's that Woody Harrelson R-rated film. And it's playing, and then all of a sudden the parents notice that, oh, this isn't for kids. So they immediately paused it. And they actually brought us all to the video store because they couldn't leave us all at home. And we exchanged it for Super Mario Brothers, which then we came home to watch Super Mario Brothers. So that was
they were like,
first...
"Hey, no, that's not for kids. Let's go get this movie with these two plumbers brutally murdering people in a dystopic Blade Runner-esque city."
100%. Yeah. So there's my little anecdote of first watching Super Mario Brothers. So stupid.
Yeah, no, I saw this when I was like, so I would have been, well, okay, we should say too, because like, I was trying to think of like, why didn't I see this in the theaters, right? And I do remember even like the trailers being like, well, that looks odd.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like another nail in the coffin for this film, which we should mention because it's very important. So first of all, the movie's just not good.
Yeah.
And it gets bad reviews right off the bat. But 2 weeks later, do you know about this, Chris?
No.
What hits the box office 2 weeks after Super Mario Brothers is released?
Jurassic Park.
Right. So this
Yeah.
movie had no chance, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's, I'm sure, like, I was just too excited for Jurassic Park to bother going to see Super Mario Brothers, you know?
Absolutely.
But I saw it in video, and yeah, my initial response to it was just confusion, just being like, and at that point I was young enough to, I was not an appreciator yet of irony and of bad movies. That's something that came later for me.
Absolutely.
Like when you're a kid, you just think like every movie is good, you know? And like and then when you watch ones that clearly are not, or something like this, where it's an adaptation of a property you like, but it's so wrong, I couldn't enjoy it on the level of being like, haha, that's funny. It was more just like, what? Why? What did they do? And then, so like years later, I like revisited it and kind of liked it a little bit more, like on like a bad movie level. Then the last time I watched it before we did this show was I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and I just didn't dig it at all. I just found it kind of like boring.
Yeah.
And then like this time watching it, I don't know, I don't want to say I came around on it, but ultimately where I fall on it is, I'm actually going to read you a quote from Roland Jaffe.
Sure.
And it's because it feeds into what I want to say about it. He says that, well, first of all, okay, the co-director, Annabelle Jenkel, she says, I do feel in my heart it was a hell of an achievement to have made it under those circumstances, and it has in its time happily achieved cult status. I often hear many people talking about growing up loving it, who watch it repeatedly and are genuine fans. And it says, producer Roland Jaffe remains proud. It's not that I defend the movie. It's just that in its own extraordinary way, it was an interesting and rich artifact and has earned its place. It has strange cult status. That's where I ultimately fall, and I completely agree, because this is a movie where you totally understand why it's a cult movie. And we already kind of alluded to this, but like whatever else you say about it, it's a movie I can't love, but I can't hate either, because you watch it and you're just like, wow, every moment of this is so baffling that it's just like, it's a very fascinating movie to watch. And it's like a very strange part of like video game movie legacy and history, where it's like, wow, this is the first one and look how wrong they got it. But that also, it ultimately makes it kind of entertaining. Like, I don't think this isn't a hard movie to watch. You know, you're not angry watching it.
No.
It's not, I said before that I watched it once and I was bored, but this time I was like, yeah, it's not boring. Like, you're always like, huh? So I would recommend people check it out. I don't go into it thinking you're getting like a true Mario Brothers movie, but it is just like it's so weird that
it's worth it for just like every baffling decision.
Right.
And, yeah, I feel very similar. I was a little conflicted, right? Because I'm watching it knowing that this movie's like, I don't want to say trash, but it's like, you know, this movie is like a bad movie. And now you have 35, weirdly enough, this is the 35th anniversary this year, 2020 of the film, I believe, right? No, that's not right. Doesn't matter.
93, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Can't do math. But you have so much history of it being so bad. It's just like my feelings on it is it might be the furthest from source material Hollywood has ever produced. Like, I can't really think of anything that has been so bafflingly wrong in every single way.
I was actually trying to think about that as I was watching it, because there was this weird tendency around this time too, when people do movies of like properties where they couldn't figure out how to adapt it. It went into this like weird trend of like, one of the first examples I can think of is the Masters of the Universe movie.
Right.
Where they were like, well, should we just do Masters of the Universe? No, let's have all these characters come into our world. And we even just got a more successful version of that with like Sonic the Hedgehog, where they're like, well, why not just do the Sonic movie as a Sonic movie? And like, no, let's have them team up with a human in like the real world. And then you think of stuff like the Garbage Pail Kids movie is kind of even the same thing. But like, as strange as that like thinking is, this is still like even more off, because like you said, it's like this is trying to take like the basic premise, but then I don't know, like,
but not even that, like not even that, like
changing every piece in such a way that it becomes almost unrecognizable.
Well, we said like even little just design choices, right? Like the Goombas in general, like making them so off the mark. It's this little artifact. It's this little cinematic cult artifact of like a different time and just an experimental time. And for back in the early 90s to get, you know, what is it, like $50 million to do that is pretty respectable. Like, it's pretty commendable, I guess. And also for the owners of the IP, Nintendo, to say do whatever you want is something that is gone. Like that.
Well,
that
I think this movie is why.
happens.
You know?
Oh, I guess you're right. Yeah, you're so right. That's the reason why. The first one out the gate, fuck it, do whatever you want, and then it's just like, oh, never mind.
That's like, because like that's another, when I was watching this time, I was trying to like remove it, and that's the strange thing about this film, and that the irony of the film is that the only way to enjoy this film is for the ironic, bizarre, rubberneck, looking at a car crash enjoyment of, wow, how is this Mario Brothers?
Yeah.
So I was because it's so far from the source material, I was trying to like look at it and be like, well, what would I think about this movie if I had no knowledge of the Mario Brothers? And you took that away, and then you just watch this as like a weird family adventure film, and then you realize that that's where it starts to fall apart, because you're like, oh, it just doesn't. It's really not that interesting on that level.
You're right.
It's not that good, but it becomes oddly entertaining when you're like, what? Those are the Goombas? Why does Big Bertha look like that? Wait, Koopa's just a dude? Like, that's where it starts to become funny.
Totally.
But yeah, like when we talk about like, so the whole point of this show is us trying to figure out like why something didn't become a franchise. This one is pretty clear on. You can't just, for all this, ultimately this is a movie that's broken at the beginning, because for whatever you want to say about the production and how these directors were clearly out of their league and didn't ingratiate themselves to anybody and create a horrible work environment, all this behind the scenes mess, multiple drafts, a script that wasn't finished as they started filming, all these like all the greatest hits, right, of like bad filmmaking. But ultimately, you can't adapt a beloved property and change it this much and expect the audience to go with you. And that's the problem. This movie failed because it angered an audience that was waiting for to see the game they loved on the screen, and that's not what this movie gave you. Now, like I said, that in years to come, you can gain a cult following from people who are like, well, I like that you took such a weird risk, but you're shooting yourself in the foot in the moment.
Yeah. Like, I don't think I'll ever rewatch this again. Like, that's one thing. Like, I've seen it now probably, a handful of times. Especially when it used to be on cable. It was one of those movies
I think it's going to become one of those movies that it's probably the best way to watch it is with someone who doesn't know about it. Like, knows Mario, and you're like, well, do you know about the Mario movie? And then showing it to them, like, that will always be fun, right?
Absolutely.
Like, oh, you're not going to believe this,
Yeah.
But yeah, beyond that, I don't know.
Hell, Luigi doesn't even have a mustache. I realized that at like an hour and a half in. Like, there was like 10 minutes left. I was like, wait a second.
By the way, Leguizamo, I've seen him with the mustache. He looks good with the mustache.
Yeah, just kind of. Well, they wanted him to look like a boyish charm, right? Like, that's totally what it was.
Somebody should go back and George Lucas this and just add the mustache.
Yeah, the
Get
mustache
those people
cut.
that took the mustache off of Henry Cavill.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Get the same team.
Yep.
But yeah, no, that was. I mean, I don't know what would have happened if this movie was successful. Like, obviously,
It does have a sequel tease. Yep.
It does, as we always say. With these types of movies, at the end, there's somebody, an existing character will show up with a brand new gun or weapon, and we gotta go get the fucking power sword to do this, to do that. And it's literally what happens here. Daisy shows up right at the end, busts through the wall, like, busts through the door, and is like, you guys gotta come with me. I need your help. And she's got, like, this big, huge, like, machine gun looking thing. It's so bizarre. It's like she looks like Ripley. And every movie does this, and then it ends. And then by the way, there's a power ballad over the credits. Just want to note that.
And a post-credit scene.
And a post-credit scene, which is funny to say that this was like unheard of at the time. It's stupid. You don't have to watch it. But the funny thing about the sequel that never happened is that there was kind of this fan fiction comic. Did you hear about this?
Well, it's not fan fiction. It's actually from one of the screenwriters.
Okay.
Yeah, Parker Bennett, one of the team that came on, the initial Rocky and Annabelle team that was brought on to make it more into like a darker version. He's been a long proponent of like, the movie's fun, people like it, and he's the one who actually did the webcomic. Oh
wow. And so a little bit of plot on that is that, I mean, it seems very similar in merging the two dimensions, but in this way now you just have a new Koopa who is Wart, and Wart was the bad guy from Super Mario Brothers 2, Trev's favorite game. So it was just kind of similar type of stuff.
The problem with the webcomic is that he never finished it.
Yes, it never completed.
Yeah,
and it was late.
Yeah, you can 2013, I think it says.
Yeah, 2013 to 2015, and then it just ended right before Mario and Luigi go to fight Wart.
Yeah. I'm surprised like other fans haven't just picked it up and finished it themselves. That's where you could probably maybe some have, but his version is just sitting there unfinished.
There's also something so Trev sent me a link earlier in the week here, and this shows you. So just
this is pretty important. This is like sometimes like it's fun for us to talk about these movies and stuff. Like we get our shits and giggles just goofing on these failed franchise starters, but sometimes we got to report the hard news. These
are facts. So listen closely, and I'm glad you listened for the last over hour of us. But this is what you really came for.
Yep.
And this would have maybe changed if this movie was successful. Okay. So right now, Pornhub has released recently, actually this week, released information about Luigi, and apparently nobody wants to fuck Luigi.
Right.
And so they did a poll. They did not a poll, but they did some like data entries here. So September 13th, 2020 is when they did the math. Mario is definitely the leading search for Pornhub. Then Princess Peach. Then a bunch of other people.
They're basically looking at people who are searching for Super Mario porn.
Right.
They basically plugged in the algorithm to say like, well, which characters are they looking for the most?
And of course, Mario, Princess Peach, of course, right? Mario's gotta, Princess Peach,
Gotta get his mushroom wet.
Gotta get his mushroom wet in that peach. Okay. Luigi
Mario's gotta jump down that pipe. You know what I'm saying?
Peach has got to work that pipe.
Sorry.
Okay.
We both apologize.
For all you bestiality people, Yoshi is halfway through the list, just in case you want to know. Luigi is second from the bottom, from Birdo. Birdo is the least searched one. Trev talked earlier how much he loves Birdo, so I can tell who was searching that.
Yeah, that single search result.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, look at Birdo's mouth.
Birdo also spits the egg out. Know what I'm saying? Okay. Luigi is a lower search, but this is a funny fun fact too. Pornhub men, surprisingly, are 571% more likely to search this porn than women. I know you're shocked. I know you listeners. I know you're shocked. There you go. The hard facts here. You came to Failure to Franchise to know what's going on in the film world. Well, guess what? Nobody wants to fuck Luigi, and Mario Peach be getting it on.
But as you said, I feel like the people aren't taking into account the Leguizamo factor.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a shirtless Leguizamo scene in this movie, and let me tell you, maybe that would change these search results a little bit if more people saw.
Yeah. If there was Super Mario Brothers 2 and Leguizamo got that mustache, bam, you got it.
Yeah, I ultimately don't know what I would even want like a sequel to this to be, because I feel like just by what it is, a sequel would have just had the same exact problem. It just would have been more like, this isn't Mario Brothers. It's like you can't go back now, right? You couldn't suddenly make a sequel to this where you go to like a world that actually looks like Mushroom Kingdom. Although it'd be funny if that's what you did, but it's like Peach showing up with that giant machine gun, as I said, and just like blowing away the actual Goombas. Or sorry, Daisy. See, I keep confusing them too. But yeah, I don't know. I'm glad there's no sequel. First of all, I think this movie deserves to be a weird little oddity. Like that's what makes it fun, is that it's just this thing. We should say that they are currently in the works to do a new Mario Brothers movie that is going to be fully animated. Yeah, and sounds like more in the spirit of isn't it like it's Illumination making it, right?
Yes, and Miyamoto is actually hands-on with it, so it's
after reading that quote, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But.
That's true, but it's slated for 2022, and at least animation, regardless of pandemic, I can see that making that date. But I'm interested in seeing that. I mean, I said before, me and my buddies are Smash Bros. Fans, and we had a Sonic movie, we get a Mario movie. Let's get Nick Fury at the end and let's get the Smash Initiative and do something like that, and a new cinematic universe for a Nintendo cinematic universe. That'd be kind of cool. Yeah, I'm down for watching a Mario movie closer to the source material. I actually like the idea of them being real people getting sucked into another dimension, and it would be
that's a good concept,
and make that animated. One thing I wanted to say earlier that just reminded me real quick is that when Mario and Luigi are on the run, we forgot to mention they're on the run, like they have wanted posters everywhere in the movie for themselves, for these plumbers, these dangerous plumbers. Why are the wanted pictures not their character pictures from the game?
That would have been great.
Like, I would forgive so much of this movie if it was just somewhat self-aware.
It would even be fun because then you could even have a moment where like the Luigi drawing has the mustache. And
Exactly.
Leguizamo looks at it and goes like, maybe I should grow a mustache. You know, like, that'd be
Done.
a fun little. Yeah.
That's exactly what I wrote down. So like that's it would have been fun. I just want to mention that before we left. Sometimes we forget.
Well, that's
to
like
say
my
stuff,
thing
so.
with them. That's like my thing with him never saying like, yeah, my girlfriend's a real peach. It's like there's these obvious things right there that they're missing. One last thing on us. So I was just briefly scrolling through my notes and seeing if there's anything we didn't hit on. Maybe this will just be a new segment that we do. Like, what did we forget to say?
Yeah.
But I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that we talked about Danny DeVito was playing Mario. We did not mention that Dustin Hoffman wanted to play Mario.
That would have been bizarre.
I'm guessing that probably comes from when the Rain Man screenwriter was on.
Definitely.
That's my only thought. But yeah, he was actually interested, and I guess made a play for it. But they were like,
wow.
nah, you're not exactly what we're looking for. We don't want like an Academy Award winning good actor.
You're too talented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that seems like a slam on Bob Hoskins, who I do love. So
I love him too.
yeah.
I guess we did sound like we were shitting on him a little bit. That's not what I meant to say.
Bob Hoskins, if people need to see like a really fun Bob Hoskins performance, I highly recommend Unleashed with Jet Li.
Yes, I was about to say. I almost said War,
Yeah.
but that's not his movie.
Unleashed. Bob Hoskins is fantastic in that.
Yeah, he's awesome. He sounds. That's where he uses his real accent, which you heard earlier from me, which is almost identical. So just if you want a taste of that, go watch Unleashed.
All right. Well, that's
Anyway.
Super Mario Brothers. Check it out. I guess. You
A
only live
ringing
once.
endorsement. Yeah, that should have been on the DVD, right? Yeah, just check it out, I guess.
You wanted to talk about what's to come in the weeks ahead?
Yes, so we're rolling into our first Halloween season, so we thought we'd give
My
you
time of year, buddy.
Yes. So I thought, we thought that it would be good to do some failure to frights. Know what I'm saying? Okay. Anyway, that was stupid.
Didn't run that by me, but that's fine.
No.
You just want to go rogue? That's fine. No,
I'm going rogue, baby.
So of course for October we thought like we should look at two horror films, and so we decided to do a little bit of a themed month and look at a couple Platinum Dunes entries because Platinum Dunes, Michael Bay's production company, has a bit of a reputation for buying up horror properties, cranking out a remake, and then maybe not doing anything else with it.
Yep.
And we're going to look at two examples of that. We're in October, on October 13th, appropriately enough, we are going to look at the Friday the 13th remake, starring Jared Padalecki and Danielle Panabaker.
I am looking forward to that because I have not seen that. So that's very
first
good.
time watch for you. And then our second October film will be the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, starring Rooney Mara and Jackie Earle Haley taking over as Freddy Krueger from Robert Englund.
The best Freddy Krueger.
Okay, this podcast is over, which means we won't get to November, which is too bad because I'm also excited for our November plans. We are going to do another themed month. Let's just be as corny as possible and say Judgment is coming in November. Can we say that?
Sure.
We are going to look at Judge Dredd, starring Sylvester Stallone, and then Dredd, starring Carl Urban. The two failed attempts at getting a Judge Dredd cinematic franchise.
And I have not seen Judge Dredd. So I'm looking forward to having the contrast on those two. So
it's a very interesting contrast.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that'll do it for this episode of Failure to Franchise. Please rate, subscribe, review.
Follow
we're on
social media.
Yeah, we're everywhere. What is it? Follow us everywhere, or we're anywhere. Follow us everywhere.
I already forgot your own catchphrase.
God damn it! I should have wrote it down. I'm gonna put a banner in front of my computer so every time I say it. But we're on Twitter at f2 the number 2 fpod at f2fpod. Same goes for Instagram and Facebook. But yeah, tell your friends.
You can even see a picture of Chris watching Super Mario Brothers in the moment.
Yes, in the moment.
This has been documented.
I know. I had a certain look on my face, and I realized it because it started to my brow started to hurt. I was like, I'm gonna send this to Trev. But yeah, so thanks for listening. This was a fun one.
Yeah, it's nothing else. It's a fun way to talk about more so than to watch. But that's fine. They can't all be winners. In fact, with the concept of our show, none of them are. So,
Perfect.
yeah. All right. We'll see you next time.
Later.